Welcome to Life's Dirty Little Secrets. I'm Emma Waddington.
And I'm Chris McCurry. And today we are delighted to have Ben Sedley joining us. Ben is a clinical psychologist based in Wellington, New Zealand, with over 20 years' experience using acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT as we call it, in both primary health centers and community mental health teams. Ben is the co-founder of ACT Wellington and brings a refreshingly accessible approach to helping people carry life's difficulties rather than being crushed by them. He's the author of several fabulous books, including Stuff That Sucks, A Teen's Guide to Accepting What You Can't Change and Committing to What You Can, as well as Stuff That's Loud, A Teen's Guide to Unspiraling When OCD Gets Noisy. He's co-authored that with the very energetic and lovely Dr. Lisa Coyne. And his newest book, which we'll be talking about today, is Holding the Heavy Stuff, Making Space for Critical Thoughts and Painful Emotions. Welcome, Ben. We're so glad to have you.
Hello. It's lovely being here. It's really exciting. I'm all the way over in New Zealand, and it's very exciting to talk to people on the other side of the world.
We're very glad we're here to have you. So in your newest book, Holding the Heavy Stuff, you write about people who are struggling with and overwhelmed by low mood, worries, self-doubts, or just being mean to themselves. So what are you seeing out there in the world that told you you needed to write this book?
I work in a city where everyone I know is struggling. There's recession on, there's hard times around, and we watch the news, and there's hard times all around the world. And there's not enough support for people. Not everybody needs therapy, but there's not enough therapy for everyone who would like it, both because of availability of clinicians and also because of how expensive we are, let's face it, and how you can't get into public services. So we need all sorts of other ways of supporting people, of helping get across these ideas of how we can think about mental health differently and how we can support ourselves and everyone around us differently. And we need TikToks and YouTube videos and all sorts of clever, fancy stuff that's not in my skill set, but writing is something that I can do. And so I tried to put together this book, Holding the Heavy Stuff. It's my attempt at writing a self-help book for people who don't normally read self-help books. It's short. It's got lots of pictures. People ask me, how have I written 3 books? And I say the answer is, don't use many words, use lots of pictures, and pay someone else to draw the pictures. And that's what I've put together, both with those first 2 books for teens and all the parents saying, this book is great, when do we get an adult version? And so now we've got one of those too.
So you're talking about try that again. You're talking about holding stuff as opposed to getting rid of it. So, and this is a very ACT perspective on things where it's hard to shut off this internal dialogue. So how do we live with it in a way that's healthy and not creating problems for ourselves? Can you talk more about that? I think you talk about carrying versus fighting.
That's exactly right, Chris. We've got to figure out these thoughts are going to keep on coming and emotions are going to keep on coming. And I wouldn't want us to be living in the world that's so sad and scary without feeling sad and scared and angry and all the other emotions. So the goal isn't to get rid of them. The goal is, how do I put them in my backpack or carry them along as I move towards all those things, those people, those ideas that matter to me.
There's this lovely Pablo Neruda poem about carrying my sack of dark stones. Yeah, which makes me think of how, we're all burdened by stuff.
And we're all burdened by stuff, and everyone's walking around wishing they're carrying someone else's stuff instead of their own stuff. Oh, if only I had that problem instead of this problem. And it's all just stuff, and it's all painful, and there's room inside us for it. The thing that gets us stuck is the thought we have that this is too big for me. I can't carry this. I shouldn't have to carry this. And that's those thoughts like that, those thoughts about our thoughts and about our feelings that keep getting us tangled up and trying to get rid of all that heavy stuff rather than learn how to carry it.
I do love that you talk about the heavy stuff, like because one of the things I notice is that we're all carrying our emotions. Emotions come and go. We'll have different experiences every day. But in that, there's also a lot of self-criticism about, why do I carry this? This is not that big a deal. Or, someone else has it worse, or someone else has it better. So that in amongst that heavy stuff is a lot of that self-criticism about the why, which just makes it heavier, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. We have this idea, because there's so many finite resources that we're running out of, that sometimes we feel like maybe compassion is finite. If I'm giving some to myself, I'm taking it away from someone else, and no, that person deserves it much more. Or what about this? And the good news is, there's enough compassion for you to give some to yourself and give to everyone else who needs it. You're not taking from anyone else when you give yourself compassion.
So one of the things that in that is really important, our automatic reaction, and I see it with myself every day, is to struggle to try and get rid of the heavy stuff, is to sort of fight those emotions. It's like, if only I could think more positively, or if only I didn't care as much. I'm doing a lot of work at the moment with burnout, and I'll be asked, why can't I just care less? Why can't I do that? Or parents who feel tremendously guilty about, trying to navigate that very fine line between, working too hard, too little, and parenting too hard and too little. And so it is so hard. But the urge is to be self-critical and to try and figure out how to get rid of this stuff. The urge isn't to be more compassionate. The urge is to fix. And we talk about that, a lot in this podcast, is comparing, ourselves to others, but also comparing ourselves to what we think we should be like.
That is one of the hardest parts I work with in my work as a clinician. Is people can be really heartbreaking to accept that I have to take a step from where I am today, not from where my mind tells me I should be. Sometimes I am having a really depressed day, and all I can do is get myself to brush my teeth or walk around the block. But while I'm doing it, my brain's like, I should be doing more. So these steps don't count. And we can only take steps from where we are. But you are completely right. There's all sorts of pressure on us to be in a different place. And this pressure comes from ourselves. We're talking about this critical voice, but often that critical voice is actually your biggest fan. That's the part of you that thinks you should be able to do anything, everything, all the time and get it right all the time. It just wants you to be amazing constantly. But its methods of trying to get you there aren't very effective. I'm just going to keep insulting you and putting you down until you get everything perfect. So we've got this internal voice that wants us to achieve everything all the time perfectly and wants to keep bullying us until we get there. And we've got all the pressure from all around us of people telling us to just get over it, cheer up, don't worry about it. All the social media of people just curating their personas so they look like they're not just doing okay, but doing amazing at all times. And we've got this basic instinct that if something hurts, I want to get away from it. And these feelings and these thoughts hurt. So it makes sense that we want to get away from it and get frustrated when the more we try and get away from these things, the more we're stuck holding them.
Yeah, it gets heavier, doesn't it? It gets bigger. But the urge to fix is so real. Like, we talk about it a lot on this podcast. Like, it's real. It comes from inside of us. Like you said, it comes from around us. And it's that inherent desire to do better. And let's be honest, it's got us really far as a species.
Humans are amazing problem solvers, and that is great when the problem is solvable.
Right.
And it doesn't work well when the problem isn't solvable because you're going over a mistake or a trauma that happened in the past, or you're busy trying to problem solve something that hasn't happened yet, or you're trying to figure out how to get rid of something that you can't get rid of, such as a thought and emotion.
Or self-doubt.
Or self-doubt.
Like that's a big one that I see, is that, people constantly trying to make decisions about how to do better, be better, feel better, look
Mhm.
better, sleep better.
And that by itself, there's a certain level where that's helpful, and then there's a point where it stops being helpful. I never want to get to a point where I think I'm doing everything perfectly. I want to constantly say, how can I do things better? How can I, last 2 days ago, I did a thing. I was just talking to two people and felt afterwards, I was looking back going, oh, I don't think I really included one of those people in the conversation. And I want my mind to be gently critical of that and say, Ben, how can you learn to be kinder and involve everybody in the conversation? And I don't want that critical voice to become so loud that I stop talking to people, or I'm so focused on it that I lose my ability to be genuine in the conversations. So a certain level of self-criticism or self-doubt helps us get better. And then there's a line where it just gets in the way of us being who we want to be.
What are some of the indicators or signs that we crossed that line? I mean, how do we know when we're getting to that area of sort of toxic self-criticism where we're not carrying these things in a healthy way?
Yeah, it's very simple. If it's only a problem if it's a problem. If it's getting in the way of me doing things I want to do that matter to me, then it's a problem. If my critical brain is pushing me to achieve more of the things that matter to me or put more energy into them, then it's not a problem. If the same thought is getting me to avoid or rush or lose my focus, then the same thoughts.
Yeah, it's an unfolding.
So a kind of generic example of a critical voice is, I've got an exam tomorrow, I'm going to fail, I'm an idiot, and all these thoughts I might have. That exact same thought, that's not good or bad. It's helpful if it gets me to do more study, and it's unhelpful if I think there's no point trying, let's just give up and go play a game or go to the pub or something else instead. I don't know if I'm an idiot is ever an ideal thought. It would be more useful to have something like, come on, this is hard, you've got this. But we don't measure a thought without understanding the function and what it does. The problem with critical thoughts is they stop us from doing the things that we want to do.
It's almost like it crushes us even further. Sometimes I think of like when that metaphor, I love the metaphor of, holding the heavy stuff. Like, it's heavy to feel disappointed in our performance. Disappointment, I find one of the hardest feelings. Like I find disappointment really difficult to hold and carry. Other people's disappointment, my own disappointment. But if we add to that the self-criticism, it's like we've got another, heavy stone, like the metaphor that you were talking about, Chris. Yeah, another thing to weigh us down or to crush us, and how to find a way to just notice that is yet another stone that's, weighing us down. And to think about, Ross White talks about treating emotions as messengers. I really like that. So these emotions shows that we care. We care about, that conversation that you had where you thought you might have left someone out. Maybe you didn't, but it comes from that place of caring. Or, you didn't do as well in the exam. It comes from that place of, I want to do a good job. Like caring means that if we don't do things quite the way we think we should have, whether we did or we didn't is kind of irrelevant. It just shows that we care. And so that points to something that's important. But then the self-criticism kind of, is like comes in with a marching, the drill sergeant that actually makes, crushes you further and actually can lead to apathy and avoidance and move us away from, what our feelings are telling us matters. So it's finding a way really to notice all the pieces that are coming together, holding all that heavy stuff.
Such a lovely way of talking about it. If I give a talk to 100 people and one person gives me negative feedback or looks bored, I'm going to beat myself up and think it was a terrible talk. Or if I talk for an hour and say one dumb thing, I'm going to remember that one dumb thing and to be able to take in that breath, find that wise, kind, strong, confident part of me that can stop and say, hang on, let's see this bigger picture here. Let's see what really matters. What are you aiming to do? And are you working towards it? And you don't need to get it perfect, and you don't need to get it perfect for every person, and you don't need to get it perfect for yourself. You need to be taking steps and moving forward rather than staying still until you know how to do it perfectly.
Well, I mean, focusing on that one dumb thing we said, or one bored person in the audience, I think is Kelly Wilson would say that's just the kind of monkey we are. Going back eons, we had to be incredibly vigilant about making those kinds of mistakes because, back in the day, that could be fatal. Either in terms of the way the world was set up, where things were, and sadly, there are lots of places in the world where things are that dangerous. But, back when we were living in these small tribes, if you said one dumb thing, that could mean you were about to be cast out, which meant you were going to die. So I think it's really ingrained in our DNA and in our, neurology that you can't screw up. It's bad.
That's in our DNA, and it's a reality now. What social rejection is still one of our biggest threats. I saw somebody passed out in the park, and they looked like the kind of person who I wasn't sure it was safe to go and approach. And I was thinking, wow, if they looked a bit different, I would be rushing over and checking they're okay. And so that is a level of social rejection, which I have to own up to, and did, even in day-to-day life. Was that person just passed out because they had drunk too much or had something else happened, and I didn't go over and help them out? So that's an example of me being the rejector. Ooh, you're hearing it all here today. All my confessions. You go, wow, you're interviewing Ben. So far we've learned about him. He's rejecting when he talks to people in groups, and he leaves people passed out on the road.
Oh, and he's beautifully
one out of 1,000 times, but that's what we zero in on. But now you're having to carry that and hold that.
Yeah.
And make peace with that somehow. And we all have those stories.
Yes.
We all have
the dirty little secrets.
Yeah.
So what I was alluding to before, the way I talk about it in Holding the Heavy Stuff, which is something I learned from Dennis Turch, and Dennis learned it from Paul Gilbert, is of how to cultivate that compassionate voice. And learning that compassionate voice is kind and strong and confident, meaning it's committed to knows what matters, and wise. And if you put all those parts together, that's how you get this compassionate voice. This part that says, hey, this is really hard. Life is really hard, or that was a really hard situation, and you've got this. This is worth it. Keep going.
And you cut yourself some slack.
Yeah.
You cut yourself some slack.
Yeah. Because like you said, you can't bully yourself into living the life you want. You've got to be your own compassionate cheerleader. I love that.
Just imagine if you thought you were going to get the best out of your employees or your family members or your roommates by bullying them until they start doing things right. I'm just going to keep yelling at my flatmate until they do the dishes the way I like it. Or we know that not only is it mean, but we also know, more importantly, it doesn't work. You don't get the best out of anyone else by insulting them until they get it right. Yet somehow we think it's going to work for ourselves. I'm just going to keep insulting myself until I get the best out of me.
Well, there's that classic Psychology 101 class exercise where they have one person leave the room, and then the group decides what they want that person to do when they come back into the room. And they get the person back into the room, and the only feedback they give them to try to shape them into doing thing like write their name on the board, for example, is to clap as they get closer to doing that. And then you do it again. And, and you can pretty quickly shape somebody up into, as they go near the board, you clap. And then as they, pick up the the marker, people are clapping and then they write their name. And then they do it again and they have somebody come back in the room. But this time you boo. The entire class is booing them when they're not going where they need to go. And it's a disaster that the person is like paralyzed and they can't accomplish the hidden task. It's a very powerful exercise.
It's very powerful, but even, as a clinician, we see that so much when people are trying to care for themselves or parent their own children, and all they've got is that negative blueprint that I know what I don't want to do. I know what it felt like to get booed or insulted or put down or hurt by people when I was growing up. And so I want to do the opposite, but I don't actually know how to do the opposite. And so I'm stuck. So how do you learn someone to not just stop the booing, but also learn to do that clapping for others and for themselves is what it looks like more on a day-to-day basis for me as a clinician.
And I do think that it is a lesson we need to learn. Like the assumption is that we need feedback on what we're not doing. Like I get that all the time. I used to get that when I was teaching. Tell me what I'm not doing right. And when I'm working with organizations, I want to hear more about what I'm doing wrong. Like there's that inherent belief that somehow if we know what we're doing wrong, we can do it right. And
or just not be wrong. I don't care about being right. I just don't want to be wrong.
Yes, ever.
I just don't want the shame. I can deal with being incompetent. I can't deal with being shamed.
Yes. So we want that, but we don't really need that. That actually doesn't help us. It's much like that, a great example, Chris, of the clapping versus the booing. We're asking people to tell us what we're doing wrong to boo us, but actually doesn't shape us very effectively. Doesn't help us to do things in the way that we truly want to do things.
Well, the other thing I love about that clapping example is, as you said, the person takes one step towards the board and everyone claps. You pick up a pen and everyone claps. And you're getting that constant reinforcers for all those really small steps in the right direction. Whereas my critical voice and a lot of people's critical voice is like, when you do the entire task, then I'll give you some kind of reinforcer, right? And we know it doesn't work on other people, but somehow we think I don't deserve any praise for myself until I've done the entire thing and done it all right. And that example is just going, nope, the way to get the best out of me, just like is the same as the way to get the best out of anyone else. I only clap with every step in the right direction.
And I'm always shocked, actually, at the fact that we're so much better at doing this with others than we are with ourselves. Like it's really always easier. Like if I ask somebody, or even myself, would I ever speak to somebody else like that? No, goodness, never. I would never say that. And yet we feel quite comfortable doing it to ourselves. To that bully is just so easy and natural. It'd be even more shameful to do it out loud, right? If anybody ever heard us speaking out loud to someone else the way we speak to ourselves, we would be mortified.
It's that reverse golden rule. They say do unto others as you want. But actually, I want to treat myself the way I treat other people. Is sometimes a place where we get stuck.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you mentioned in your book, you have sort of 5 steps or 5 tools to get a person on a path of carrying these things effectively, lightly, however you want to describe it. And the first one you mentioned in the book is presence, which I really love. Just noticing as a first step. Just, oh yeah, and there I am talking to myself that way. Stepping back. And so, in ACT, we have the classic metaphor of the difference between looking through a thought or a feeling and looking at it. It's like, I'm such a loser. Oh, I'm having that I'm such a loser thought, right? Which is, it's still there, but I don't have to dispute it. I don't have to, restructure it. It's just, or even if I can't get, the glass is off. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm having one of those loser thoughts right now. Here, what do I need to do? So tell me more about your thoughts on presence and noticing, and why you even chose that word presence.
If something goes wrong, you're rushing home to say, oh my God, there was a car accident and I saw this and I saw that. And the first thing someone will say to you is, okay, just take a breath. You rush into the hospital and say something that, take a breath. It's the first piece of advice we give to anyone else. Before we say what's wrong, before we say what can we do, you say, take a breath. And so how do we use that on ourselves as well, right? Before I start using all my self-compassion techniques or I start thinking about my values, take a breath. This is where I am right now in this moment. These are the thoughts I'm having right now in this moment. And I love the way you talked about them as I can notice that I'm having these thoughts rather than I am these thoughts. To do that, I need to take a breath, notice where I am in this moment. And it's not always a breath. For some people, breath isn't a safe place because of the childhood experiences. But it's something, either breath or your five senses, or some other way of noticing where I am right now. This is who I am. This is where I am. These are the thoughts I'm having. These are the emotions I'm having. And then I can choose the step I want to take next. But if I don't stop and use that presence, connect to where I am in this moment, then I can't take a step from where I am right now. I'm busy trying to take a step from somewhere else, and it's never going to work.
Like that, taking a step from somewhere else.
And we can practice it throughout the day. Like it's actually incredibly hard to practice this. It sounds so simple, and yet it is really hard because our minds are constantly rushing on to the next thing or fixing or telling us that, we need to be doing more. So actually stopping and anchoring in the present is challenging.
Minds, our frontal lobe thinking minds just hate it. I can say, not even talking about a big formal meditation exercise, I'm saying let's just stop and take 3 minutes. Set a timer on my phone, do 3 minutes of breathing, and my brain will give me a million reasons why now's not the time to do that. Do I have time to get through Wordle and Squirtle and connections and everything else? Sure, but to stop and put down my phone and take 3 minutes of just breathing, my mind will say, here's the reason now is not the time, and what happens if you start doing it, then this happens, or minds don't want to do that. And we can think that makes sense if we see our mind as a danger protection machine, because in this moment, I know I'm safe. So my mind goes, right, I'm safe. Let's start thinking about what the next danger is. But how do we train up our minds to say, actually, it's safe to be in this moment, to notice where I am right now? And another big confession from me, got me all the secrets out today. Much as I am an ACT clinician and train people in ACT, I have always struggled to maintain some kind of formal mindfulness meditation routine. I remember I had 1 month where I made a commitment to make sure I did something every single day. And I got through the month. And I made that commitment, but do you think I kept up with it even after a month? No, it drifted away again really quickly.
I'm impressed that you gave it a month. I mean, I can't even give it a week. So I'm with you.
It was a lot of discipline. And what was weird was I got to the end of it and I was trying to reflect and saying, did it help? Do I need to do it? And I cannot point to what it did, why it was helpful. And yet it felt helpful inside. It felt like, hey, there's something powerful in repeatedly every day, just letting your brain know it's safe to just to be right here, not having to problem solve the next thing that's showing up. And then even with all that knowledge, my mind said, yeah, all right, but now we've got to get back to worrying about the really important things, like what's going on that TV show you're watching, or what's happening in the war on the other side of the world, or wonder what your friends were saying about you after you left that event, or all the different stuff that our minds like to say.
It's such a good reminder. And I think what you said about sometimes we can't put our finger on how it helps, which makes it harder, right? In this sort of brain that we have, we want, outcomes. We want to know how it's the impact things are having. And, it's not so obvious what taking a few breaths does to our nervous system in that moment. Those regular reminders that we're safe may not have an immediate impact, but over time, it's down-regulating that nervous system that is so naturally agitated by everything we have around us. The world is busy, our phones are busy, our brain is naturally busy. So these breaks do help us to, I think of it as just calming my nervous system down, which allows me to be more effective.
In holding the heavy stuff, I compare it to a cat. When I wrote the book, it was about my neighbor's cat, but since then we've got our own cat, so I can watch our little cat do these things. Now, a cat will be off on adventures in her mind, trying to figure out how to chase that bird, or all the stuff, whatever cats do. Who knows what's going on in their mind, but it's always fun to watch them because they always look like it's pretty exciting where they are. But then they see a sunspot, or they find a comfy spot to sit, and they're like, I'm just going to be here for a bit. I can take a break. I can do that. And humans, we've got really bad at just finding that sunspot, or even better for our recharging our internal systems, creating that soothing system is safe human contact. Having a hug from someone that matters to us, or that's what regulates small children, and we often forget about it when we're older. But finding those spaces where you can sit and be quiet and regulate our system and calm our system down can be so useful for us. But I think when we talked before, Emma, about we're not sure how these things help, there's a problem. This is one of the secrets that we're going to reveal today, is that there's a lot of people making a lot of money by marketing mindfulness as this is going to fix your anxiety, or this is going to fix your stress. And so I've done my mindfulness and I still feel stressed. I'm obviously getting it wrong. I'm failing. If I'm just using enough self-compassion, then I won't even have any critical thoughts again. If I just do enough mindfulness, I won't feel anxious or stressed ever again. And I'm sorry to say, that's not how it works.
It's even built into John Kabat-Zinn's definition of mindfulness, where he talks about it's non-judgmental. Good luck with that. I mean, how do you know you're being non-judgmental without judging that? And I think that's the trap that people fall into. It's like, oh, I'm having a judgmental thought, I'm not being mindful. It's like, well, if you're having a judgmental thought and you're stepping back from that, if you're aware of it, you're noticing it, you're treating it with curiosity and self-compassion, you're good to go. But yeah, I mean, that's people want the fix.
Yeah.
When I did my clinical training, I did not hear the word mindfulness once. And I'm old, but I'm not that old. But it just wasn't part of our training.
No.
Nor for me.
And yet now there's not going to be a single teenager or adult who's going to walk into my practice who hasn't already been told to try mindfulness, who hasn't. And, my 9-year-old son's class does mindfulness in school every day, but actually they're just coloring in or doing quiet play. And that's lovely. And that's a very good thing to do. But if you think that's what mindfulness is, and you go, well, I've did my coloring in or my sitting quietly or my breathing, and I still feel anxious, there must be something wrong with me. I'm even getting mindfulness wrong.
Yes.
Then we've got a problem, right? For me, and that's why I didn't use the word mindfulness in the book, I just talk about holding the heavy stuff with presence.
Yeah.
Just one breath at a time.
Yeah.
Which is all we can do on a bad day.
Yeah. Or any day, to be honest. I mean, when I think about mindfulness, I've, been through the journey where I was trying to establish a practice because I would be such an imposter if I didn't have my own practice, of course. And I fought that corner. And then I realized that that's just not me. I remember I was at the Maudsley at the time and having these lovely conversations with another clinician who loved her mindfulness practice. And I was like, why can't I love it? Why am I not like you? And then I realized that it's just not my thing. Sitting down for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 5 minutes, it's just not my thing. But that doesn't mean that I cannot practice coming to the moment, especially when I'm feeling upset about something or agitated or nervous or anxious, just coming back to now and reminding myself that my brain is taking me places that may or may not be very useful. And what that looks like can be just noticing my feet or noticing, what my body feels like in this moment. It doesn't need to be anything very complicated, actually. It can be really quite simple. And even noticing that my heart rate is going up. That
Just
sometimes can
checking
be
in.
just enough. Exactly. It's like a little
Checking in.
check-in. Yeah.
Where are my shoulders right now? If they're in my ears and I'm too stressed and I need to just stop and slow them down.
We all
I
just
think
did that.
Yeah.
We all just took a breath together.
Yeah.
And then from there you can pivot.
Yeah.
I think what you're saying there, Emma, is so powerful that somehow all these self-care techniques, all these self-compassion and the mindfulness, they're all kind of marketed as this is your new magic tool to feel happy, and other people are doing it right and you're doing it wrong. And when I said at the start, I was trying to write a self-help book for people who don't read self-help books. That's exactly what I'm trying to, how do we get these ideas across in different ways, change the game so it's not one more thing that you're getting wrong. It's, these are small steps I can take. If I'm talking to someone and they've been told to try mindfulness and they're still feeling miserable and they take that to mean they're doing something wrong, then we've got a problem. We've got to help them understand that actually you're not doing something wrong. You've just still got a human brain and a human heart. And there's room inside you for those thoughts, for those feelings, for those doubts, for those memories, for those urges, those sensations, those images. And sometimes they're going to be really heavy. Even if you do all the compassion in the world, all the mindfulness in the world, some of the stuff that we've got to hold can be really, really heavy. The good news is, though, there's room inside us to hold it.
Well, I know mindfulness has been criticized because it could become a tool to allow people to withstand situations that they probably shouldn't be withstanding. There's a book out there called Mindfulness, which is about this whole self-help industry and things. I can't remember the author, but and it goes back to burnout as well. It's like, helping people with burnout is just saying, okay, get back in there, and tolerating intolerable situations. And I know, Ben, in your book, you unpack the whole idea of acceptance, which is, tricky within acceptance and commitment therapy, because people think of acceptance as, well, I just need to accept that I, be abused or whatever it may be, as opposed to that's the starting point for going, wait a second, I'm being abused, and then making the changes that you need to make. So none of these strategies should be used to keep people, trapped in situations that they really need to be getting out of. So it's knowing what to accept and what to change. Going back to that serenity prayer thing.
I so agree with that acceptance, presence isn't to stay in the same situation. It's to notice where you are so that I can make a choice. If my house is on fire, I need to stop and notice that my house is on fire and then choose what I want to do about it. Rather than just saying, well, it shouldn't be on fire, or it's not fair that it's on fire, or what did I do wrong that led this house to be on fire? All those things, or I'm just going to tolerate it being on fire. I want to use my presence to notice, actually right now, I'm in a situation that isn't sustainable. And I'm going to now choose to stand up and move towards what matters to me. which hopefully if your house is on fire, it's getting out of your house.
Grabbing
And
the
it's
cat.
about grabbing the cat. It's about, how do I make things better for me and the people around me? You quoted Kelly Wilson before, and Kelly Wilson said something wonderful to me. Answered a question at a workshop I was at with him, where he said, if you're fighting all the time, you've already lost. That we need to make the world a better place, and we need to notice if we're fighting all the time, and notice where we are right now, and notice all the stuff that's going right, and knowing the relationships we've got that matter, and be part of that, and also notice the parts that aren't going well, that we want to stand up and speak out against or do something about, whether in my own life or in the causes that matter the most to me.
I wanted to come back to the idea of how to be our compassionate selves within this conversation, because I remember reading about Brené Brown talking about, what does self-compassion look like, or what does compassion look like? And she calls it the compassion slam dunk, that actually when we are incredibly compassionate, we have boundaries of steel. We tend to be really aware of people's limitations and our limitations too. What can we influence and what do we need to let go of? And she refers to a study that was done with women who were in abusive relationships. And what she found was that the women who had the most compassion for their partners were more likely to leave, were more likely to make the decision that this relationship needed to end. And that's always stayed with me, because when we think of compassion, we often think about this sort of endless generosity and being understanding and sort of being a bit of a doormat. But actually, that's not the compassion that, really works. It's not about subjugation.
Not about subjugation. Sometimes it's not even about kindness. Sometimes compassion is fierce or bold, or, I could explain away that one behavior you did, but actually that's not what's right for me, and it's not what's right for you. And I need to speak out or make a change or leave this relationship. And people often confuse that kindness and that compassion, and that often kindness keeps us stuck in a way that compassion doesn't.
In the interest of time, final thoughts. Ben, this has been a lovely and I think very valuable conversation for our listeners. Any sort of parting words? Go out there and do X tomorrow.
This has been such a fun discussion that went in all sorts of places I hadn't expected. And thank you so much for including me. My final thoughts are, I invite everyone listening to just be curious about the tone of voice they're talking to themselves in, and say, would you ever use that tone of voice with anyone else? And maybe can you cultivate that? You don't need to believe it. You don't need to get rid of the other thoughts, but can you also just have a go saying, this is hard and I've got this? And just being curious about what happens when you say that.
Love
Yeah. I love that. And not to be too hard on ourselves when we realize we're too critical. Like I had that urge. It's like, oh man, sometimes when I listen to myself, I go, what is wrong with you? Why do you speak to yourself like that?
Even right now.
So yeah, not to get stuck in this sort of vortex of self-criticism, but yeah, we're doing the best we can.
Ben Sedley, thank you so much. Your books and how to get them will be in the show notes for today's episode. If there's anything else, any other resources that you think would be useful for listeners, send that to us and we'll make sure that's included in the show notes. Thank you so much for a really wonderful conversation and for all the good work that you did.
Yes, really.
Thank you so much for inviting me today.
So fun. Thank you.